astronomical increase in electricity tariffs and other perceived anti-people economic conditions being foisted by the federal government's policies and programs. The Nigeria Labour Congress had served Nigerians notice about the impending action, but that planned strike never materialized, having been called off by the leadership of the labor movement with just a couple of hours to go. That decision seemed to have rubbed a good number of Nigerians the wrong way, and there are those who actually believe that the negotiating labor leaders had sold out to the government and betrayed the poor masses in the process. The Nigeria Labour Congress, which is the umbrella body of Nigerian workers, has since then come under a lot of pressure from several aggrieved interests. Joining us now to respond to this development is Emma Ugboaja, General Secretary of the Nigeria Labour Congress. Welcome to the program. Good morning.
Thank you for having me.
Good morning, Mr. Ugboaja. Thank you for joining us. Well, very quickly, the subject that is of interest to every Nigerian, the hike in electricity tariffs and then the deregulation of the downstream sector and the role that has been played by organized labor in the negotiations with the federal government of Nigeria. After the last meeting that you had, we were told that a committee had been set up to look at some of those issues for 2 weeks. Where are we with the negotiations with government? Any hope that those who are saying there should be a reversal of the increase in electricity tariffs and also on price of fuel, any hope that they will have that reversal?
Well, clearly, like you pointed out, discussions are ongoing with government. Certain levels of understanding have been reached, and clearly is work in progress. Like we say in labor parlance, the struggle continues. But it's very important we place on record what the Nigerian Labour Congress is against what it is not. The Nigerian Labour Congress is the labor center, an umbrella body for trade unions in Nigeria. Trade unions in Nigeria. The Nigerian Labour Congress is not a political party. The Nigerian Labour Congress is not a revolutionary movement. The Nigerian Labour Congress is a labor center interested in the welfare and well-being of workers and consequently their families. 2 issues came up as a pressure point on the Nigerian working family: the issue of the hike in electricity tariff and the issue of the increase in the pump price of petroleum. For 30 years, whenever pump price is increased, it is termed deregulation. And for key players in the industry and for labor that has followed this process, we know that that is far from the definition of deregulation. What normally comes up is a hike, an increase in the pump price of petroleum, which is couched in whatever term the government in power wants to couch it. But basically what happens is a hike in price. And over the years, we have engaged it. We have massive literature, we have massive positions that we have canvassed over the years, unadulterated. And the position is still clear. The driving force for us is with regards to how to take care of the well-being of our members. These particular increases hurt us much because we're just arising from a minimum wage review, which we then suddenly saw being eroded by these twin attacks on the ability of the worker to get something that can take him home. So on where we are, the committee with regards to the power has set off working. We hope in the next couple of days to get a formal report from them. And what necessitated this was a clear understanding on all sides, even the ordinary person we earlier referred to, that what is going on in the power sector is completely not acceptable to anybody. It's a fraud that was hoisted on Nigerians with the imaginary privatization under the Jonathan administration. We were told that the discos will be sold to well-known world entities that have capacity, technical capacity, and have international financial muscle. None of this happened. Rather, these discos were given to political associates and cronies. And therefore, the expected result of efficiency, the expected result of inflow of money never happened. Rather, we have witnessed a continuous deterioration of the assets that these discos inherited. And the federal government, which ordinarily had sold out these discos, was still funding them with over 1.5 trillion in the past 5 years. And they felt they were not going to be able to sustain this anymore, and sought to pass this to the regular Nigerian consumer. That was where we were at, and we felt that was not the way to go. The parties came to the table, we had discussions, and it was clear to everybody that we needed to have a second look at what was going on. It was on the basis of this that the joint committee was set up. It was on the basis of this that we agreed there should be a suspension of the tariff until the report of this committee to confirm whether what the discos were putting out was real or whether we're still being given the wrong end of the stick. So the committee is working, and we expect them to turn in their report in the next couple of days.
While we await that report, what do you say to criticisms of your efforts at negotiating or protesting, as the case may be, that you got the wrong end of the stick yourselves and did not understand that it's a service-related tariff and not a cost-related tariff, that you are protesting something you did not take the time to understand? And also the National Labour Advisory Council, that has also been criticized as just some kind of placebo given to the labor unions to make you feel as if you've accomplished something. But in reality, it will have no practical effect. What do you say to those criticisms?
Those are criticisms that are born out of ignorance, because when people bandy cost-effective and non-cost-effective tariff, the truth of the matter is that the power sector in Nigeria is rotten. And that rottenness emanated from the past administration that did the wrong thing, that sold out our national patrimony to a couple of their friends who are unable to manage the power industry. It has nothing to do with the Nigerian Labour Congress. It has nothing to do with the understanding of the Nigerian Labour Congress. We cried out that our members who were supposed to enjoy for a while the benefits of the minimum wage were about losing that through a funny tariff regime that wasn't making sense to anybody. And if we misunderstood it, there won't be a suspension. If we misunderstood it, there won't be a joint committee. So it's laughable for anybody to say Labour misunderstood it. It's laughable for anybody to say Labour went into it not knowing what to do. If we did that, then clearly the outcome would have been different. But that there was an understanding that there needs be some inquest, there needs be some inquiry, there needs be some investigation, some looking into what was transpiring. Clearly cannot be a product from people who didn't understand what they were saying.
I want to ask you a direct and honest question a lot of Nigerians will ask. What would you say you have gained for Nigerians in all of this fight? Some will say what the government gave back to you was what we've normally, or what we'll normally see. Old news, old story. Palliatives, for instance, said they were going to give palliatives. If you look at the papers, they're inundated with a gross corruption about the palliative system. They'll buy buses, they'll do turnaround maintenance of refinery. We've been hearing that since God knows when. And these 2 weeks windows and discos and back and forth as regards it. I mean, what would you honestly say you have gained for Nigerians? With this strike, you say, okay, you were going to embark on, and you called off on the morning of that strike. What would you honestly say you've gained for Nigerians?
Like I have told you before, the NLC is not a political party. The NLC is not government. The NLC is made up of affiliates that are made up of members of trade unions. We have gained for the members of the trade unions. We have gained for the labor center. We have gained for the working families that appreciate the intervention we have made. We have not gained for the out of work politicians who saw NLC and the working people as cannon folders to use to cause destabilization from which they will benefit. We have not gained for people who wanted a mesmerizing of the regime for them to get back to relevance. But for our members, we have gained. We have gained intervention that will see us get some reprieve with regards to housing. We have gained the intervention that will see the taxing that is going on with regards to minimum wage at the lowest level re-examined. We have gained an intervention that will see the reflecting of the labor mass transit and also the reflecting of mass transit across the country. We have gained the participation of workers in the only business that Constitution and statute allows a worker to engage in, which is in agriculture. Those we have gained, but we have not gained bloodshed in the streets for those who were looking for that. We have not gained alternative or regime change for those who wanted that. But for the regular Nigerian worker, we have gained for them.
Well, Mr. Ugboaja, you started by saying you've been able to reach some understanding with government. And I would like to know whether this includes the ideological point about insensitive neoliberal economics that labor leaders often complain about. Has Labour now agreed with government that the deregulation of the downstream sector and the reign of market forces with regard to the pump price of fuel is something that is inevitable? Is that part of the understanding that was reached?
That is not the understanding. We didn't have any understanding with regards to ideology. We have an understanding that there is the need, without ideology, with common sense, for a product that is produced in Nigeria to be refined in Nigeria. We saw that as top priority. We didn't need any ideological pushing to have that understanding. We didn't need to have any ideological shift for people to appreciate that what is being called deregulation is no deregulation, that you are importing fuel and hiking the prices based on some inputs that definitely will have to exist if you are importing fuel from outside, does not amount to any ideological shift. So with regards to ideology, that had nothing to do with it. There was no ideology at play. What we have at play was common sense. The need to have refineries in Nigeria working, both public and private. That was what was at play.
And to what extent would you say that we're closer to that outcome? Because the whole idea behind your threatened strike was a recognition of the economic pressure your average Nigerian is under.
Not only the average Nigerian, the worker. There is nothing that says any other Nigerian outside the trade union movement that feels pressurized will not raise a voice. There is nothing. Labour called off a strike. Labour did not call off any pain that Nigerians are feeling. Labour did not tell any Nigerians not to complain if they are feeling hot. But Labour felt that as a product of social dialogue positioning, as a key player in the social contract scenario in the country, with the president of Nigerian Labour Congress being the president of the International Trade Union Congress, social dialogue was high on our agenda. And it wasn't the first time Labour was going into dialogue with government. So if we had gone into dialogue and in our own estimation and in our own appreciation on the negotiating table, that we felt that we had gotten some reprieve for our members. And our members did accept that. That was good enough for us.
Was the reprieve you claim now to have gotten for your members. Was it really for your members or for the top echelon of labor? Because a lot of people say, oh, you've been given juicy positions. Labor will have representative in the NERC, for instance, on the board. Because with all of this you said, I don't see anything. Not that the pump prices have come down, not that the electricity tariff will be reversed to the last tariff. It's just a 2 weeks period window, and then palliatives, then doing turnaround maintenance on the refineries. Not that they'll solve all the problems of importation in this country as regards that. So, I mean, I don't get it. A lot of people say the reprieve is just for the top echelon of labor that went for the negotiations, and they are good. What do you say to those sentiments?
Those are the sentiments of depraved minds that would have preferred blood to flow for them to then feel there is a reprieve for everybody. The truth of the matter is the top echelon that went for the negotiation are not the ones that are going to be boarding the mass transit buses. The top echelon that went for the negotiation are not the ones that are going to have the tax relief. The top echelon that went for the negotiation are not the ones that are going to be assessing the housing. Less than 14 people went for that negotiation. We're going to get not less than 420,000 workers assessing agri loans. Those cannot be top echelon. So it's the burden of the Nigerian elite that prefers to hide and push out imaginary folks. We didn't set out to solve the problems of Nigeria. It will be wishful thinking and unfair intellectual laziness for people who appreciate what the trade unions are to imagine that the trade unions will solve all Nigerian problems from one meeting at the negotiating table. It is thoroughly unfair to push Nigerians through this type of reasoning, because it's the same reasoning that made a columnist or a reviewer in one of your sister stations, not yours, to say, hey, why was that meeting taken to the banquet hall of the State House? That it means they went there to eat. It is such a very cynical way of pushing things that has hurt the Nigerian people and not labor. It's the elite who sulk and get pained when they are out of power that try to push those kind of narratives. But the truth of the matter is labor is about democracy, it's about representation, and we will continue to do what is right for the working people.
Well, Mr. Ugboaja, what is the minimum that the public should expect as the outcome of the ongoing negotiations? For example, Labour is insisting that the refineries be fixed. Now, certainly those refineries cannot be fixed between now and, say, the end of the year. And what that means is that, well, perhaps we'll still continue to rely on market forces. Even if you want something done about electricity tariffs, we've had the suspension for 2 weeks. What is the minimum that the average worker should expect in terms of outcome?
On the tariff, you've seen it clearly. The suspension has taken place. The product that will come out from the joint committee will determine the way forward. But we know that definitely that would lead to a reduction or a complete abandonment of the tariff hike, because the facts are stacking clearly against the process the discourse undertook. With regards to fuel, we are determined to have refineries work in Nigeria, whether from the public sector or from the private sector. Ultimately, that will be what will enhance development. That will bring employment. That will bring the different products that come from crude oil that we are losing out and is not helping our development. That, in the long run, is what will be our benefit.
You've made a couple of references to bloodshed. I find that quite alarming. Would you like to expand on that? Is there a threat of bloodshed? This is supposed to be a democracy. And where do we find the happy medium between capitulation and bloodshed so that your aims can be, advanced for the working class of Nigeria?
For the workers, we don't carry arms. But in the course of the negotiations, information was put through that there were people who were waiting to take advantage of massing of workers in the streets. And of course, for us, it's not about massing of workers in the streets. Ultimately, it's about dialogue. We have the high position of being able to sustain dialogue. There was nobody on the negotiating team of government that has seen the process much more or had much more experience than most of the labor leaders involved. We had on labor negotiating team general secretaries of the electricity unions that had traversed more than 3 administrations. We had people from Nupeng and Pegasin that have traversed more than 3 administrations. And we just had, with due respect to the word, rookies that were on. So clearly, the issues were straight. We weren't going to demonstrate on the streets. We were going to compel government to come to the negotiating table.
Well, on that note, thank you very much, Mr. Ugboaja, General Secretary of the Nigeria Labour Congress. Thank you very much indeed.